This is the Classical Ideas Podcast. Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 14 of the Classical Ideas Podcast. This is Greg Soden. I have just a bit of housekeeping before I get to today's topic. I'm so thrilled with the conversations thus far, and I can't wait to bring you more episodes of this podcast. If you're enjoying the Classical Ideas Podcast, you can help by subscribing to the show in your format of choice, whether that be iTunes, Stitcher, CastBox, or even YouTube. The show will also be coming to iHeartRadio in October. Also, if you could rate the show, that would help. Podcasts get pushed to larger audiences when they receive ratings. If you could take a minute and rate the show wherever you listen, that would be amazing. Lastly, if you like a particular episode and you use social media, please share the show with your friends. It would be so helpful if folks who like the show would share it with curious and interested people. Upcoming episodes include Rinzai Zen Buddhism, Brahma Kumaris, Unitarian Universalism, Chabad Lubavitch and the Rebbe Menachem Schneerson, Kabbalah, Vipassana Insight Meditation, and more. Best wishes to all of you who have enjoyed some or all of the first 2 months of the podcast. So today's episode is Hinduism. There are roughly 900 million Hindu practitioners in the world today, living mostly in India. There are about 1 million Hindus in the United States and about 300,000 in Canada. Hindus tend to call their tradition not Hinduism, but Sanatana Dharma, meaning eternal law. Hinduism is the world's oldest religion and has similarities with Sikhism, Jainism, and Buddhism. The major concepts of Hinduism are samsara, or the cycle of birth and death and rebirth, moksha, meaning the liberation from the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, dharma, or duty of one's life, karma, or the law of cause and effect, kama, the search for sense pleasures, and artha, meaning wealth or power. Hinduism is commonly called a polytheistic religion, but it's not nearly that simple. A more accurate term for Hinduism would be polytheistic monotheism, meaning that every incarnation or representation of a deity is a picture of what human beings can relate to as being God. Vishnu is one representation of God. Ganesha is one representation of God. Rama is one representation of God. Parvati is one representation of God. God, in this case, is an unknowable force in the universe called Brahman, which holds the universe in harmony and balance, so to speak. Our human brains aren't really powerful enough and can't actually understand God or Brahman, so we create depictions in order to have a personal relationship with God. The great stories of India that I most highly recommend are the Bhagavad Gita, which is one tiny sliver of the bigger story of the Mahabharata, and the Ramayana. My favorite translation of the Bhagavad Gita is by far by a scholar named Eknath Easwaran. His introductory chapter is stellar and will give you the backstory of the Mahabharata quite clearly. The translation by Barbara Stoller Miller is also wonderful, and you can find the audiobook performance by Professor Jacob Needleman of the San Francisco State Philosophy Department at jacobneedleman.com/Bhagavad-Gita for free. You can also download it on Audible. The Ramayana has a prose version written by R.K. Narayan, which is also good. I'd highly recommend the comic book version published by M.R. Chitakata in 2009, and then immediately follow up your viewing with Nina Paley's fantastic film, Sita Sings the Blues, based on the Ramayana, available for free at sitasingstheblues.com. In these texts and the film, you will get a snapshot into some of the epics of ancient India. So today I'm speaking with my friends Gopal and Anantha Gopalaratnam, who are sustaining members of the Shanthi Mandir Hindu temple in Columbia, Missouri. Gopal and Anantha are highly active in the local Hindu community, and every year they give copious amounts of free time to the religious studies courses Gopal meets with about 140 school students per year to discuss Hinduism, and both Anantha and Gopal host an open house visit to the temple for students, their families, and their friends. This year, about 90 people from Columbia, Missouri stepped foot inside a Hindu temple for the first time in their lives, thanks to Gopal and Anantha. These kinds of experiences cannot be had without the dedication of Gopal and Anantha, and I'm so glad they are joining me for the podcast today. So without further ado, I bring you Gopal and Anantha Gopalaratnam. Welcome to the Classical Ideas Podcast. This is Greg. I am here today with my friends Anantha and Gopal, and we are going to talk about Hinduism. So thanks for coming on the Classical Ideas Podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So I kind of want to just start off with asking you to both kind of discuss the purpose or goal of Hinduism in your view. And I know that Hinduism is incredibly diverse, and so basically everything that we're going to say today is only from your own personal perspectives. So if you want to go ahead and talk about what is the purpose or goal of Hinduism to you?
Greg, before we move further ahead, I'd just like to say that I don't have any training and I'm just like a lay person. And whatever I've learned about Hinduism is by growing up in a family that practiced it, and out of my own personal interest, what I could read and learn, and for the sake of my children. When you have children is when you realize that these are things that you would probably should think about, because they will be questions that come up and you'd like to know what to say. So that's my disclaimer. And about the goal of Hinduism, for me, I think that it is to help you to live your life in harmony with your surroundings, and also it helps you to balance the duties of the different roles in your life, and perhaps through that, reach the self-realization or your oneness with God. I don't have such lofty goals. Mine is just to use this idea of harmony and helping you fulfill your duties as a means of reaching that goal.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think Hinduism is a vehicle to allow me to seek the truth. And truth here is not the literal meaning of truth, but truth as practiced in Hinduism is the realization of God. Basically, the ultimate truth is God. And so it offers guidelines of how to live a righteous life. And Hinduism, as you're aware, is a way of life rather than a very structured religion like many other major religions in the world. And so the practice of dharma, kama, artha, and moksha are basic principles in Hinduism that allow us to seek the truth.
So the concept of God within Hinduism kind of varies from person to person, I know. But what does the concept of God mean to each of you?
God is an abstract form. In Hinduism, Brahman is a supreme deity. He is omnipresent, omniscient. And so to be able to relate to this God, we have many different forms that each one of us is comfortable with, like Shiva, Vishnu, Ganesh, Brahma. And our belief is that at least one school of thought is the Advaita philosophy, where we say that ultimately the godliness within us is no different from the Supreme Being or Brahman. The Atman ultimately merges with the Brahman. The Advaita philosophy is one practice of Vedanta that was preached by a saint by the name Adi Shankara.
And that's called the principle of non-duality, where the devotee is able to recognize that they are actually part of God, and once the realization of divinity comes, and that is supposed to come like through one of the things is like universal love. You are able to love everybody. It's not that just you think to yourself that you are God, but then you actually act like God in your compassion and love towards everybody and everything. In that way, you become you are able to reach the ultimate truth, or the realization that you are also part of that supreme being.
So, what do you both think that Hinduism does really well as a religion? Like, what do you both really love about Hinduism?
One of the things that Hinduism offers us is a practice where we recognize that the truth is one, but inspired ones, sages, call it by various names, and the truth is the ultimate reality. There is a very popular phrase from one of the Vedas, the Rig Veda, which says, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. That basically means truth is one, but seekers call it by different names and different forms. And that being the case, the Brahman is the ultimate reality. Whether you practice reaching Brahman through Ganesha or Jesus or Allah, all doors are open. So Hinduism is a very tolerant religion in that sense. One does not have to practice a certain form. There are denominations within Hinduism where nirakar or no form is also a way to God. The other thing about Hinduism is because it does not have a centralized structure like many other major world religions, it is very dynamic. It's able to adapt immediately to local conditions, local demands, desires. And so, in spite of being in place for several thousand years, it has been able to adapt to the present day. And the ability to adapt is actually due to the fact that we don't have a centralized structure. There is no one single leader. There are many denominations.
For me, I think that the fact that Hinduism gives you the freedom to choose your path to God, and it provides many different ways based on your specific talents or your specific abilities, your likes. We are told that the path of devotion or bhakti yoga is one way. The other one is karma yoga, or the path through selfless service. And then there's jnana yoga, which is the path of knowledge. So there are different routes and ways in which you can conduct your practice so that you can reach that ultimate goal. But my path may be different from yours because my talents, my abilities, my liking may take me down. Like some people like to do rituals, and we have one of the things is called namasmarana, where you chant the name of God, and others may choose to conduct a lot of service where you do things for people, help people. That may be your path to God. But so we are given these several routes to reaching God, and that I find extremely empowering.
That's also, I think, one of my students' favorite things whenever they learn about Hinduism in our classroom, is they love the fact that there's so much choice involved. And I think that that's something that really draws them to wanting to know more about Hinduism in general, is the diversity of choice within everything.
Yes, and so actually for Hindus, the spectrum is completely open, like from complete atheism to being an ascetic and a hermit and devoting your entire life to God. Everybody has a way to reach God, and God is not going to deny any one of those people if they have lived their life, a life of dharma or righteous conduct. It can take you there. You're not denied a place.
I think the other thing that I want to also add is that the value system in Hinduism should be understood from the ritualistic practices of Hinduism. The value system basically has values like love, truth, righteousness, peace, nonviolence, compassion, tolerance. All of these as primary goals for a human to attain self-realization or enlightenment or moksha. The ritualistic practices of Hinduism is what makes it very mysterious to other non-Hindus. And so the value system that Hindu practices is no different really from the value systems of major religions, but it also allows atheists, agnostics, to practice the same value systems and be a good Hindu in principle.
So in the year 2017, the world is really interesting. It seems like there's so much wild news swirling around us all the time. I'm curious if there's any problems facing Hinduism as a religion, or if there are any misconceptions that you wanted to talk about at all.
There are several misconceptions. Obviously, a few of them, like the practice of idol worship, is considered primitive in many circles. It is just one form of worship in Hinduism. As I said, there are other denominations within Hinduism that do not practice idol worship. It's the level of comfort, instead of an abstract concept of a God who is present all over at the same time and knows, all-knowing and all-pervading. Essentially, it is something that you can physically associate with so that you can be in the proximity of God. So idols typically in a temple are given a life form. So we believe that these idols are living deities and they are close to us. That is one common misconception. The other common misconception is that Hinduism is a polytheistic religion. As I had explained earlier, we believe in a supreme being, Paramatma, who is Brahman, and Krishna, Rama, Vishnu, Ganesha are all forms of that deity with certain level of comfort to the devotee. And so these are reachable forms that you can identify. Brahma is a formless deity.
Also, we have this concept of Ishta devatha, where you can have like a favorite form of God, and then you develop a personal relationship with God. And so I think that helps make the concept of God accessible to people in different stages of evolution in terms of their spirituality. So wherever you are in your stage of growth, there is a way to make God accessible to you. And I think that is one of the purposes of the idol, is a symbol or a representation of various attributes. I don't think there are many Hindus who actually think of it as a stone. They are looking at the spirit beyond that image.
This is something that I actually don't know the answer to. Can a person in their different stages of life decide to switch the form that they are most devoted to?
Absolutely. You have the complete freedom. See, we were raised in a family that belonged to the Vaishnava or the Vishnu as the supreme god. It's like a sect or a subsect within Hinduism, and so we have a certain kind of rituals and things like that. But we are perfectly comfortable, and our altar has Lord Ganesha, who is the son of Lord Shiva, and we love the Rudram chanting during the Shivratri, which is the main prayer for Lord Shiva, and we do not see any contradiction in this. There may be people who are extremely like staunch followers, and so in their concept they need to be not to be swayed from their purpose or focus. They look at it like that. When we look at it, it is just that you are enjoying a particular festival of a form of God with those attributes, and I do not feel any contradiction in that.
I think we were brought up in family and a time when we were open to all religions in India. We studied in Catholic schools. We had neighbors who were Sikhs, Jains, Buddhists, Muslims. And so we were equally comfortable with that. And so for us, a form like Jesus or Allah or Guru Nanak are almost equal in every sense of the word to Krishna or Rama, and we are very comfortable with that. And that is basically what the meaning of that Ekam Sat is, that there is one true reality, and forms really don't matter. Forms are comfort levels.
So I know that both of you are lay practitioners, and so you're not scholars of Hinduism.
Absolutely.
And you both have told me on many occasions that you both still learn new things and you like to learn new things. So who are some of your role models in Hinduism? Who are some of the people that you like look up to and read, and they can be alive or dead, can be anybody?
I would say for myself, Sathya Sai Baba is one of my spiritual heroes. He was born in a Hindu family, but he preaches value systems that is interfaith, non-denominational. And just like simple concepts in the Vedas that we've been taught, he teaches value systems like love, truth, non-violence, righteousness, peace. And it boils down to 2 or 3 very simple concepts that all of us can practice, not necessarily Hindus. Love all, serve all is one of the very popular lessons that
maxims
that he taught us.
Way to conduct your life.
And the other simple ideas are practice harmony of thought, word, and deed. Obviously, it's easy to strive for that, but very difficult to actually practice. And then also cultivate equanimity, meaning that you don't get super elated when something good happens and be down in the dumps when something bad happens, because good and bad is our own perception of what a situation is. And so these are very simple practices that kind of capsulate much of the teachings in all the world religions.
So that last name, that surname is Sai Baba, S-A-I space B-A-B-A.
B-A, that is correct.
Just in case anybody wants to check out some of his writings.
The way I looked at as the role model is people who have applied the principles of Hinduism to their own lives and have also helped solve problems for others, and have like shown a path. So there's Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, We consider him like a saint. He started what is now called the Ramakrishna Mission or Ramakrishna Mutt. It's like an order, a religious order, and there are some people who are lay people and others who are like monks within that order, and they do immense good all over India and in the world too. And others, I would say, like Mahatma Gandhi, I thought because he has applied the principles of Hinduism to solve some really difficult problems during India's struggle for independence. But the principles that he applied were like ahimsa or non-violence, and then used that to create a civil disobedience movement called Satyagraha. So he used these principles of Hinduism to help during that, and that showed a path. I feel, and Swami Vivekanand, who came to the US and was able to expose the principles and philosophies of Hinduism and share them with the West. There are so many people, and also people whom in your life you meet, and then they may show you some aspect of how they conduct their life, and that's guidance for your own. I really admire, there is a elderly lady who is part of our prayer group. We call her Kusmanti. She lives with grace and embodies the qualities of kind of universally being affectionate, which I think would solve a lot of the world's problems. And I always think if I can be half as good as she is, it would be, I feel I would have reached some major milestones in my life.
Beautiful. So you just mentioned some problems facing the world today. So is there any sort of Hindu perspective on what some of the world's major problems are?
I think many of the practices that that are becoming fashionable again, like mindfulness, living in the present, being aware, awareness, living simply so that you do very little damage to the environment around us, both people living as well as non-living, sustainability. These are issues that confront us today. And for a long time, Hinduism as a way of life has these concepts integrated into practice of Hinduism. So a person who truly practices Hinduism would already be in sync with all of these green and present day concepts. So I think those are the major problems, and Hinduism has always taught us to address these issues. Sometimes the human frailty and the need for doing things fast, we forget some of these lessons. But Hinduism has integrally included some of these in the scriptures.
Yeah, I think the fast pace of life now actually perhaps takes you away from these principles, because it was integrated that you are part of nature, and to be in harmony is like every aspect of your life. It was integrated into it. But I think the fast pace of life and the media or everything that maybe makes you think that you want more things, those things take you away from having some peace of mind. And like I have a small example of how the thing of being one with nature is illustrated, is that in Hindu homes, when you wake up early in the morning, you have to go out and like clean the front portion, the entrance to your house. And they used to have like an earthen road, so people would sprinkle water to settle the dust. In a warm climate, where there's less rain, the dust will fly. So you settle the dust by sprinkling water, and then you decorate the front of your home using rice flour. You make a beautiful pattern so that the entrance to the home looks beautiful. But the rice flour is also intended to feed the insects and birds that live there. And so at every moment, you have to be aware of how you are part of this bigger thing and try to be in harmony with it. I think given the fact that now you'll have to catch the 7 a.m. train in order to get, and then the fact that we live in these big apartment buildings, so that is one practice that is lost. So like that, there are little things all the way that you are perhaps not able to maintain. And maybe those things, those help to create a balance and to remind you. But now, you're rushing to the next thing and the next thing. And that takes away your peace of mind.
I feel that deeply as a parent whenever my 4-year-old is, wanting my attention, and she knows when I'm not present. She knows when I'm not mentally giving all of my attention to her because I'm fiddling with something else, doing something that in the grand scheme of life is not important. What's important is her, but I tend to struggle with fiddling with things that don't matter while she is craving my direct attention.
Yes, I think while multitasking has been highly promoted, or parallel processing, it is also a very big culprit in taking away your peace of mind. And so perhaps we should refrain from multitasking in the personal aspects of your time.
I'm reading a book right now called Siddhartha's Brain about the practice of meditation and the science behind it, and the fMRI imaging that comes from serious meditators over the course of their life. And the book backs up that exact thesis that there's no such thing as multitasking, that we've been sold a faulty bag of goods, and we really should focus and redouble our efforts with trying to be more present and focused in our lives.
I think that's one of the problems with technology, is that we are distracted and the pressures of multitasking. So we don't get the time to think and reflect. And as a result, what happens is, and this is not unique to Hinduism, this is a common problem for all of us, is that we live by sound bites, which allows individual thought process to be hijacked by leaders who necessarily are not very well equipped to lead. And so I think that this, as a plug for this podcast, the podcast is a very good use of technology where people get time to understand about things that they otherwise would not have read. And so technology can be used to a very good purpose. And also it is convenient for us in this lifestyle to be able to listen while you're driving and so on and so forth. So it is a very good medium, particularly for the intelligent young new generation.
And what's really ironic is that while we're having this conversation, so I'm running this podcast here and I'm watching the recording go across the screen,
right,
and I'm just making sure everything's going okay. So even in the moment when we're talking about awareness and presence and mindfulness, my mind is flitting from thing to thing, and it's just ironic. I had to make a little joke there.
Yes, it is ironic. We talk about it, but obviously, you cannot shun technological advances, and Hinduism actually tells you don't have to shun technological advances, but I guess everywhere we talk about balance, and it's for you to discover what is the balance in your life.
So what are some of your spiritual goals for your life?
Be a better person today than yesterday. Learning hard to practice harmony of thought, word, and deed, and also cultivating equanimity, as I mentioned earlier, and leading by example, because as a faculty and as a father and as a elder in the community, example is probably the best way to teach folks how to live a better life. And so we are in the path of learning ourselves.
I guess the spiritual goal is to live a well-balanced life and to be able to accept and deal with life's ups and downs and with grace and humor. And like I said, I don't have lofty goals. My goals are rather pedestrian, but it's like step by step.
So, as I mentioned in the introduction, both of you are invaluable members of this local community, for your community, and also for the ways that you contribute to the public schools every year for the last several years. So why do you think it's important for people to study about all religions? Like, why did you agree to come on the podcast? Why do you host field trips at the Hindu Community Center? Why do you come and visit the students year after year?
An educated population really is a population that is free from fear and anxiety. Often ignorance or lack of knowledge of other religions, other cultures is what breeds anxiety and fear. So one of our goals is to educate people about Hinduism, that if you remove rituals from Hinduism, the value system is something that all of us can understand and live by. Ritualistic practices are obviously necessary for some of us. Some of us don't need those practices to actually practice the philosophies of the religion. So I think it's very important for the younger generations to have the opportunity that is available here in the local community to understand a diverse population that we live in the present day, religious-wise as well as culture, social strata, all of it. And so we are kind of not anxious about people whom we think we don't know.
Yeah, I think it's really important, for one thing, to know all your friends and neighbors, all the people who are around you. It's good to know more about them and to be open to receive their ideas and to share your own. So I really enjoy meeting people of all faiths and cultures and to learn more about them. I find that extremely interesting, and I think that by sharing, like Gopal said, you take away some misconceptions, and you know.
And one other thing that is very important is talking to kids in high school. It opens your eyes to the type of questions that they have that you may not have thought about Hinduism. So it also allows us to reflect on what does it really mean and how best to explain to kids in the high school age. We also meet with interfaith communities in Colombia with a similar goal of educating the Colombia population about being open to all religions, understanding them, respecting them, not necessarily buying into the ideas, but certainly being aware of the strengths of each of these religions.
Yeah, I definitely feel that in the process of being asked to come to the schools and talk to the students, it has been a tremendous learning experience for me. And even this podcast, I just live. But something like this forces you to think about what is it that you're doing and why are you doing it? What are your motivations? So thank you for the opportunity to reflect. because that's really important, and this gave me an opportunity to stop and think about my faith and your philosophies. Why do we do what we do?
I think we would be kind of remiss if we did not conclude the podcast with a universal prayer from the Vedas. It's actually the essence of the Vedas. It's called the Gayatri Mantra. It's a very important prayer. It goes like this. Om Bhur Bhuvaswaha Tatsavitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yonah Prachodayat. What it means is we meditate on the glory of the creator of the universe, who is embodiment of knowledge and light, who is the remover of sin and ignorance. May he open our hearts and enlighten our intellect. So it is got three parts. One is the adoration of the creator. The second is meditation. And the third is a prayer that he might illuminate us with knowledge and light. This is really the essence of all the four Vedas.
Gopal and Anantha, this has been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. And thank you so much for coming on the Classical Ideas podcast.
We enjoyed it very well.
Thank you very much, Greg. And as I told you, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to reflect as well.
It is my pleasure. The Classical Ideas podcast is written and performed by me, Greg Soden. Original music is composed and performed by Derek Strybig. His music can be found at www.wearewarmmusic.com. Thanks for listening.
तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्.